I spoke about God is sovereign, is supreme. The second thing about God is all-knowing. The third thing I want to speak about is God is independent. Turn to your neighbor and say, God is independent. In Isaiah chapter 44, verse 24, say, I'm the Lord who makes all things. Say, all things. Who stretches out the heaven all alone, who spreads abroad the earth by myself. God spoke. One day, a group of scientists got together and decided that man have come a long way, and we no need God anymore. They decided to call one of the scientists to go to God and inform God about this thing. So the scientists walked to God and said, God, we have decided we no longer need you because we have come to a point that we can clone people and we can do many miraculous signs and wonders. So why don't you just go on and move on and leave us alone? So God listened patiently to this scientist, this man. After the scientist was done talking, God said, how about that? Let's say we have a man-making competition. Wow, sounds good. So the scientist replied, why not, God? Okay, how? God said, why don't we do it in the old days, back in the old days with Adam? So the man said, of course, sure, no problem, God. So he bent down and he grabs a handful of dirt. And God pointed and said, no, you get your own dirt. Well, according to the dictionary, independent means not dependent, not subject to the control or influence or determination of others. Sometimes we heard of a person that is independently wealthy. This is supposed to mean that they are so wealthy. This person is so wealthy that they never needed anybody or anything. How could it be? When we think about God, we realize that He's totally and completely independent. But how can a person do not need anybody or anything? But God is different. God doesn't need anything. He doesn't need money, for He created anything He needs or wants. He doesn't need the earth or its vast universe to live in. For He was entirely happy and complete before the earth and the universe was ever created. The independence of God, I want to share with you all, can be understood by two ways. Number one, God's independence spells out that He is self-existent. You see, God doesn't need anything or anyone to exist. There are requirements for our existence. We as humans, we need our parents to exist, but not for God. We must have air to breathe and food to eat. We must have shelter from the environment and clothing for our bodies. But God, no need none of all this. In the beginning of all things, without Him, nothing exists. He is self-existent. The second thing about God's independence is that He is self-sufficient. You see, nothing in heaven, under the earth, is able to add anything to God. We can give Him all the glory we are able, yet all of this will not add anything to God. Church, I want you to know that He's exactly the same as He was before any glory was given to Him. If our given glory will add anything to Him, this will mean that there is something missing about Him in the first place. So God doesn't need to depend on us to be God Himself, to elect Him as God. So we, on the other hand, are dependent. We cannot live without food or water, as I mentioned just now. We depend on our parents and life and clothing when we are as a child. And when we grow older, we depend on our family, our friends, our job, our education, etc. We need all these things to make it in life and society. But sadly, at times, we are so proud as human beings. We think that we can live as if we don't need God anymore, as if we are the captains of our lives and the master of our own destinies, as we have all the things pretty much in control. But the truth is that in times of desperate need, many of us would still cry out to God, help me in moments of desperation. There is even a drama in Hokkien, a song that says, 我们听, 我们听. True. In moments of desperate moment, we cry out to God. It's very dangerous to live a life thinking that you don't need to depend on God, because you will never know what is going to happen tomorrow. Life is fragile, my friend. Life is fragile. You don't know what is ahead of you. Therefore, you are not in control. Turn to your neighbor and say, you're not in control. So don't depend on yourself. Don't just say, all right, Andy, I'll depend on God, I'll depend on God. Don't just say it. But rather, truly believe that you can't do all this. There were moments in our life, as we look back to our past, we know that was God's moment. That was the aha moment that God empowered me. God has led me. Remember the moment where you struggled getting a degree and you made it? Remember the winning speech in a public competition? Remember the new job that God has given to you? All this was given to you so that His name will be glorified. Amen? For the fact that you're breathing right now, you're dependent on God. That He will continue to supply the oxygen from the tree He has created. That He will not cut it. So trust in Him. Never be your own driver. Depend on Him and let Him drive. Don't ever depend on yourself or your own strength. Because once you start doing this, you'll end up depending on your own. That one day, the enemy will come and blur your vision so much that you start to blame God that He wasn't there in a time of needs. Are you all listening? Are you all listening? God is independent.